Nice to have you here, Joel, for the first time at an IIBLP event, especially as China Systems have been a partner with IIBLP for more than 20 years at physical events in many corners of the world. You had a very interesting article blog, Jewel of the Nile, posted on the China Systems website just a week or so ago, and you know, Joel, it actually intrigued me.
Well, good to be here for China Systems, Vin. I'm a bit surprised, at this stage of your life. I would not have thought there could be much left to intrigue you. But I'm definitely glad you liked the article.
Well, Joel, I said the article was interesting. Not that I liked it, okay? No, but to be honest, it really rang true with me. You know the feeling you get when someone tells you something that you pretty much already know, but that person communicates the same message with clarity and precision. It just rings true at you. So from the article, Joel, I got the feeling that you consider digitalization as something not brought on by fintech geeks, dare I say, but something that has been evolving for a long period of time.
Absolutely, Vin. I think there are many different degrees and areas of digitalization. Trade data is like a flowing river with many branches and tributaries, but I think many have forgotten where the river source is. Where does trade data start? Where do you also start digitalization? If you really want to be customer-centric and you want to have efficient digitalization, it's all about an efficient data strategy. An efficient data strategy should be based on a maximum reuse of source data, in my opinion.
Okay, well, I really like the river parallel. It's really, really nice, but you're already beginning to lose me just a little bit, okay?
Let's get down to business here. If you think about all the international conferences, or I think webinars these days, when the subject of digitalization comes up, what are the panelists actually talking about?
Well, my view, what you hear is that I guess blockchain, distributed ledgers, smart contracts, e-bizzolating, disruption, and all of that stuff we hear at all of these conferences again and again and again.
100% correct. And if I come back to my river analogy, these are all downstream activities, all brand spanking new, whereas the basis of trade has in fact not changed for hundreds of years, or probably even thousands of years. It's about contract, production, shipment, risk, and payment. And at China Systems, if you talk about digitalization, we've been digitalizing trade for more than 30 years now. A simple example, take an import LC. You already do straight-through processing of an LC from the applicant or the importer straight into the issuing bank, from the issuing bank to the advising bank generating a copy straight to the beneficiary for parties in not only different countries but across continents. So we've been doing that. If you purely look at what technically happens, you can do that easily in 15 minutes or less, data-wise.
Okay, that is true, and actually it's impressive. But you know, Joel, come on, that's only half the story. Where do we look to find your jewel of the Nile as referenced in your inspiring article? You're only giving me half of the picture here.
Yeah, all right. You're provoking me again, Vin. But what you need to do is you have to look at the customer.
Okay.
Then you look to the technology, not to the other way around.
Okay, can you elaborate on that particular point? Right.
Well, if you look at trade, most trade transactions, they consistently start the same way. A buyer wants to buy goods. Ultimately, that results in a quotation order. If he's happy with it, he'll get a pro forma invoice, you get a purchase order, and ultimately it results in a trade agreement. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, exactly. So if you think about it, all data in trade transactions, whether they're settled on an open account basis or a collection basis or an LC basis, they all originate from that same buyer and supplier agreement. So if you look at that, then would you agree with me that the two key documents in trade, in any type of trade transaction generated by a buyer and a supplier, are first of all the purchase order or the sales order, and the second one is the invoice? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. Of course I agree. Yeah, I'm with.
So what would you call that?
I guess at this stage I would call that, well, you can only call it one thing, and that is the contract between the seller and the buyer, in whatever means it is.
Yes, but I think it's more than that, and I'll come back to my article, and that's why I call this the golden record in trade.
The golden record, Joel. I think you're beginning to lose it here. Okay, sorry about that.
I expected that, Vin, but let me just show you one picture. So, Vin, this is my picture. I'm going to let just people look at this picture. I'm not going to explain every single flow. If you look at this, What I'm trying to illustrate here is that purchase order and invoice data is actually the source of every single trade transaction, whether it flows into an LC, import side, export side, where it flows into into collections, where it flows into open account transactions. You can see with the orange boxes, this is everywhere where data is being flipped from one instrument into the other, and where it's also being reconciled from one instrument into the other. So wherever there's arrows here, there is always purchase order invoice data involved.
Okay.
I think that says it all. Are you getting it now, Vin?
Yeah, I'm getting it, I think, slowly, but surely, Joel. Yeah, Joel, as I kind of said, I'm a slow learner, but really I'm beginning to see it, okay? The purchase order, which you mentioned, already has most of the data you need for your so-called golden record. Purchase order, buyer, importer, name and address, seller, exporter, name and address, amount, currency, goods description, Incoterm, transport, routing, okay? Yeah, I'm getting it.
Absolutely, Vin. It's taken you some time, but you're getting there.
And if you flip that core data, you almost have everything for that LC application as you showed in your diagram. For example, LC application now, we did purchase order, we have importer name and address, that's the applicant, exporter name and address, that's the beneficiary, amount of the purchase order, that's the LC amount, the goods description is there, the Incoterm there, the goods description is there. Yeah, this is very, very interesting, Joel. Simple, but really, really, really interesting.
It's doing what technology is supposed to do, Vin. Technology is enabler to enable us to do what we already are doing, but to do it better. So technology reuses data captured at the start of the process, uses it to auto-reconcile all updates, like shipments under those trade transactions, payments. That's what technology is there for.
Yeah, and to push that forward, Joel, automation of the LC issuance is already done and dusted. You've explained that that's in the can. But now from what you were saying, if we can go just that little bit further and again flip the LC data into the sales invoice as per your diagram, then we are getting, I think, quite close to what you are referring to as the jewel of the Nile. Would that be how you see it, or are we still on the same wavelength?
You're getting pretty close, Vin, pretty close.
Yeah, but in your example above, it just struck me, you definitely did not go into the complex area of documents required. For example, maybe this is just a convenient avoidance, Joel. Because you didn't mention it.
Oh, come on, Vin. I think it's easy, unless you really want to make it complex. But suppose you have a CIP contract with shipment by air. What are the documents?
CIP, air shipment, invoice, insurance, and airway bill, I guess.
Absolutely. You don't need to guess any further. That's it. All the other documents, if you think about it, can be kept outside. And in today's world, they can already be sent electronically.
Okay. Fascinating, Joel. As I expected, I already knew a lot of the parts that you've explained, but obviously you know how to put this jigsaw together. But if I can diverge, because we're at the LC survey, if I can diverge for a moment, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I've heard you express some frustration with the UCP rules on occasion. So from the workflow perspective and the business cycle, can you give me some of your perspectives of what should be addressed in the next revision of the UCP rules?
Yeah, always a touchy subject, especially with a guy like you. I'm on slippery turf now, but let me make something clear before I start explaining some of that frustration. The reality is that in the absence of a more advanced and a proven, especially, and widely available alternative, the UCP rules and all the SWIFT messaging that goes with it and the paper itself, it's working. So far it's working. It just needs to be upgraded. But you've asked me, so here we go. A couple of examples, which are also explained in my article. If you take Article 10C of the UCP 600, the rules related to amendments, while they are defined or geared to protect the beneficiary, if you really look at it, if you have multiple shipments and you have multiple amendments which have not been accepted, it's very painful. I do not really consider it as workable, especially if you get those complex situations. So that's Article 10C with amendments, very painful for technology, very painful. If you ask practitioners to check that same set of documents, you're going to get different results. Another example, also on the UCP 600, an LC today can be made available in 4 different ways. You get side payment, deferred payment, acceptance, and negotiation. The reality is, if you look at the business, we only really need 2 types. It's either you pay now or you pay later, after the presentation of the documents, which means you should only have side payment and deferred payment. Drafts are not really required in the standard rules. If you require them, because I know it can sometimes be required in certain geographies, you can still add it as an exception to the LC. Yeah? Once the obligation undertaking triggers are clear in the rules, financing or the advancing of funds is becoming easy. But if I think about a third point is about, in whose interest is it really to present document as soon as possible after shipment in this modern and cash-hungry world, Vin?
Well, obviously, Joel, the letters of credit in favor of the beneficiary, the sooner he presents.
Exactly. Full score on that one, Vin. The presentation period had a very important role to play in the past, but now those days are gone, and the associated discrepancies which our customers hate so much, it can all be removed. Vin, our research at Shiny Systems has also shown a number of interesting facts about the discrepancies. One of the most frequent discrepancies in documents is actually in respect to a conflict in the data between the documents. But often, the funny thing is that often that data where the conflict is actually not even been required based on the LC terms. So it's a bit strange if you look at, I think it's Article 14 of the UCP 600, which says that data does not need to be identical, but it must not conflict, while it's not required in the LC. I personally think that needs to be revised. Also, I think Article 2, installment drawings, and Article 36, force majeure, has resulted, I think, as everyone knows, in some very unfortunate unintended consequences. Do you want me to explain that, or?
No need, Joel. I think we get you on the force majeure, as this was a big part of this program here at IIBLP Agenda. And finally, Joel, it struck me today that you have taken me on an interesting journey exploring the river of trade finance, which has its source with the buyer and the seller. You've taken me on this journey, perhaps to the River Nile, but where is the missing jewel? So for what I see here is the missing jewel is the means of standardizing this exchange of data. So Joel, where is the jewel of the Nile?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, Vin. I think a lot of companies are actually claiming they have found it. But one thing is clear for me: you cannot find it on your own. Those who push their own ecosystem and think they will be able to onboard all trade participants, I believe those will fail. Interoperability needs to be inherent to the design of any system, as trade is a far too large and too complex ecosystem. But to come back to my article and your question, in my opinion, if the trade industry fails to agree on the standards for what I've called trade's golden record, the purchase order and invoice, I believe that our river and its currents are going to remain unpredictable for the time being. Maybe the answer will be more clear at the next IIBLP event, Vin.
Well, we look forward to having you at the next IIBLP event, Joel. And as always, thank you so much, full of knowledge and intrigue. And great. I really enjoyed your insights.
Thank you, Vin. And as you know, China Systems, we're always happy to work with IIBLP. I think it's a perfect forum for the change of ideas, and especially your sometimes, forgive me for that, your sometimes provocative questions always make it very interesting and fun. Thank you, Vin.
Bye-bye, Joel. Take care.